Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth. I'm your host, the Game Master, and in this one, we're going to be talking about the current campaign that I'm running set at the Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters. We are tentatively referring to this as our New Mutants campaign. But before we get into it, make sure you smash that like button. Check to see if you're still subscribed because YouTube loves to unsubscribe you and not tell you. And finally, leave us a comment. That helps us out on our end with the YouTube algorithm, but also we love hearing from you guys. We have an awesome community here, and that's because of you. So thank you so much for being here. So, all that said, let's get into it. The prologue to this one takes place in September of 2024 in Westchester, New York, at the X Mansion. The various students come down to eat breakfast. Bubble Girl has pancakes with tons of syrup, whipped cream, and fresh strawberries. Axel and his roommate Miguel come down to eat, and Axel is experimenting with his new power to open a warp portal to the dark dimension. He's opening small portals on the table itself, seeing how fast he can open and close them. The night before, Trace got dumped by his girlfriend, who is Axel's sister. So while Trace's eyes are fixed on the activity in front of him, his gaze is hollow and distant, as if he's not really seeing it. The weight of his heartbreak has left him just completely indifferent. Speaking of bloodshot eyes, Alexander walks in, and his roommate is Poster Boy, who was up all night long because Poster Boy's power is a form of anime image, and he used it on a Coors Light poster, bringing a bunch of female swimsuit models to life, as well as the cooler full of beer that they had with them. So the point here is that Alex wanted to get a good night's rest, but it turns out his new roommate is a party animal. So Alex is exhausted. He eats his food as fast as he can, and then he is the first to report to the danger room, making sure that he's there 15 minutes early. Bubble Girl eats her food, and she gets there right on time. Axel strolls in late. The current danger room, by the way, is pretty much just a holodeck from Star Trek The Next Generation. And when the students enter, they are now in a simulation of a shopping mall in 1989. Neon signs buzz faintly, colorful storefronts line the halls, and the sound of Forever Young by Alphaville echoes softly through the air. Hoshi, who is the student we introduced last game who thought he was better than everybody else, is here too. He's leaning against a wall and he cannot wait to watch these new students fail. Bubble Girl asks Powerhouse what the point of this exercise is, and he tells them that the point is to survive. He reminds them that as mutants, they unfortunately live in a world that fears and hates them. He says that when he was a kid in the 80s, every time he'd go hang out at the mall with his friends, the Sentinels could detect superpowers and they would show up and attack. So that is exactly what today's scenario is based on. Which brings us to the main event when the simulation begins and a Sentinel walks towards the huge glass entrance to the mall. And by the way, as it just so happens, this is based on my nearest mall to me when I was a little kid, and it always reminded me of the Hall of Justice from Super Friends. The front of the mall was shaped almost exactly like that. So if you're trying to imagine this in your mind's eye, just imagine that shape of the Hall of Justice where it's round in the front and a lot of glass, right? So at any rate, so Axel is the fastest when we rolled initiative. So he flies to the front entrance and he moves higher. He's inside the mall, but he's really high up in that round glass part. So he's about 40 feet off the ground, while the approaching Sentinel, which we used a Mark I Sentinel from the Vietnam era, is only 20 feet tall. Bubble Girl then creates a bubble around herself, and she floats in the center of the bubble using gravity decrease, which means while she's in her bubble, she is weightless, and we established here that she is always in the very center of the bubble. It is also worth noting that Bubble Girl is from an old campaign that we ran in GURP Supers, and it was in that system that we actually made her power. So her bubble has an advantage from GURPS called invulnerability to any kinetic damage, which simply put means her bubble can't be burst no matter what. So while she's in it, she seems to be safe, but she can't hurt the Sentinel either. Next up is Alexander. His Nemesis power was inspired by TSR's old Marvel superheroes role-playing game. The idea is that if he's fighting someone with ice powers, then for that round, he might develop something like fire powers that could counter that specific enemy. So likewise, if his opponent had fire powers, then maybe now he would have ice powers or water powers, or maybe he would suddenly develop the ability to suck all of the air out of the room and smother the flames. Whatever the case may be, he can only do whatever is the quote unquote opposite of whatever it is he's going up against. So he gets ready to fight. On Poster Boy's turn, he seems to run away. But what he's really doing is he's running through the mall looking for a store that sells posters. So he goes to Record Town and he starts looking for anything useful in this particular situation. But most of the posters they sell are of rock stars. So if he used his animate objects on them, they'd be useless in a fight. So he keeps looking. Next up is Miguel Norton, who has super strength, flight, and a fusion blast. He runs out of the mall into the parking lot where he attacks the Sentinel with a powerful fusion blast from his right hand. He's joined by Hector, who splits into 3 guys using the split power. All of them have every single vision power, including heat vision. So they team attack the Sentinel with heat vision, but they don't roll high enough to hurt the Sentinel. By the way, the Sentinel has a body of 12 and 5 APs of skin armor, which means the heroes have to beat a 17 to hurt it. And most of them only have a few meager APs of their various powers, so it's not looking good for the heroes. For Hector's final action, he blinds the Sentinel's cameras for a second. The Sentinel fires at the heroes, but since it can't see them, it misses. Axel fires a blast of his Dark Force energy through the glass on the front of the mall. It hits the Sentinel, but does no damage. Now, from his sniper position, with no more glass in his way, he fires again and rolls high, but not quite high enough. This blast hits the Sentinel, and black crackling smoke seems to stick to the spot that he hit. Then it's Bubble Girl's turn. She treats her bubble like a hamster ball, and she runs while inside of it, making it move over to where the Sentinel is. So when Miguel shoots it and knocks it off balance, she gets under the Sentinel trying to make it trip. Alexander basically subs the Nemesis power for lightning and strikes the Sentinel, but doesn't do enough damage to hurt it. Partially because even though he can have the best power for the job, he can still only afford 5 APs of that power. So for the moment, he does not hurt the giant robot, even though it would be vulnerable to lightning attacks affecting its electrical systems. Miguel shoots the Sentinel and does a little damage, then shoots it again. And Miguel is taking out all of his frustrations with how hard his life has been on the robot. Hector and his 2 duplicates all use heat vision on the Sentinel, but they cannot pierce its armor. On the Sentinel's turn, its foot makes contact with the bubble, and he sends Bubble Girl careening into Miguel, a bit like that big round boulder from Indiana Jones. Miguel is knocked onto his back and yells angrily. From inside the mall, Hoshi sneers at this and is entertained. Axel fires again, doing damage, while Poster Boy finally finds a poster of a Lamborghini Countach and turns the two-dimensional image into a three-dimensional vehicle. Poster Boy gets into the car, and that's the end of his turn. Axel wonders if the heroes would do more damage if they all attacked the exact same spot. So he yells out loud for everyone to shoot at its eyes. On Bubble Girl's turn, she gets to the ground safely, then makes her existing bubble go away. Then she creates a new bubble inside of the Sentinel's head and then expands it. Her powers are very weak because she spent all of her points on the fact that her bubbles are invulnerable to any kinetic damage. But then she rolls double eights, then double sixes, and then a 9. So inside the Sentinel's head, a tiny bubble appears, then expands quickly, dealing damage to the unarmored computer equipment within. The CPU is smashed, and the giant robot stops in its tracks. Powerhouse, their teacher, says, "Good job," and the simulation is paused. But Poster Boy does not hear this. So a fully functional Lamborghini Countach that does not have the safety protocols that the holodeck has comes bursting through the front of the mall. Poster Boy slams into the Sentinel, but since the program was frozen, the Sentinel does not move. Not at all. It is as immovable as the Blob. So that Lamborghini crumples like tinfoil, and Poster Boy is badly hurt. Hoshi runs his mouth about what a mess these rookies have made. So Alexander uses his nemesis power on Hoshi. And since Hoshi's power is the ability to deprive others of their powers, that means the power that Alex gets is the ability to give powers to others. So he gives regeneration to Poster Boy. Poster Boy's new healing factor kicks in, and he recovers from his injuries. Nonetheless, Powerhouse wastes no time rushing Poster Boy to the infirmary to get looked over. As soon as they've left, Bubble Girl apologizes to Miguel that her bubble ran him over in the fight, that moment that we referred to earlier as the Indiana Jones boulder scene. But rather than accept her apology, Miguel loses his cool and blows up at her, which sort of surprises everyone. His roommate, Axel, leaves with Miguel, and Hoshi comes over to clap sarcastically and run his mouth. So Alexander tells Hoshi to knock it off, and Hoshi refuses to back down. Alexander then tries to trip Hoshi as he's walking away to teach him some manners, but he fails. And Hoshi yells at him, saying that underclassmen need to learn their place. So Trace punches Hoshi, rolling double 9s, sending Hoshi into the nearest parking lot light pole, knocking him out in a single punch. Trace has been in a bad mood all game long ever since his girlfriend broke up with him. And from Bubble Girl's point of view, she thinks it was chivalrous of Trace to stick up for her. Which brings us to the epilogue. Poster Boy recovers from the car accident that he was in. Charles Xavier has a talk with Powerhouse about how Poster Boy almost died today while under the supervision of Powerhouse. Hoshi tells Xavier that Trace knocked him out. And the 3 Hectors at the end of the day are all out back behind the X Mansion, where they are hitting on Airhead, Bubble Girl, and Zombie Girl. All 3 girls shoot down their would-be suitors, and no sooner than they do, the 3rd Hector is attacked by a man named Val Grafton, who's a villain we rolled up in TSR's old Marvel Superheroes role-playing game. And he has a power from that system called grafting. And rather than me explaining that power in my own words, I'm just going to read the description straight out of the book. This is the single most likely candidate for raw abuse and grossing out your fellow players. This power is strictly mad scientist material. The hero can perform psionically augmented surgery on a subject. The hero can operate on, dissect, rearrange, and perform transplants without the need for normal medical techniques to ensure success. No matter how crude the conditions in which the operation is performed or how messy it proves to be, the subject's life force is preserved. There is no major loss of blood, nor is there any need for extensive recuperation. This power is strongly related to the healing forms of biophysical control and can be used to cure others of physical damage. Unfortunately, the power lends itself to abuse. Those possessing this power tend more towards Dr. Frankenstein than Dr. Schweitzer. Such characters see people as machines to be rearranged at their whim. This power permits the character to perform acts beyond 20th century medical science, like brain transplants. I'm going to stop there. The Marvel superheroes role playing game, of course, came out in the 80s. So that's why they say 20th century. 21st century would apply here too. You get the idea, though. So, all of that said, Val Grafton is a villain, and now the team is down 1 Hector. They just don't know it yet. We will, of course, be following that up in the next adventure, which I actually haven't ran yet. This Saturday is when I run that adventure. I record these in advance, so you won't have to wait to hear the next one. It'll still drop at the appointed time. But at any rate, as for this adventure, we enjoyed it. We hope that you enjoyed hearing about it. If so, smash like, make sure you're subscribed, and as always, leave us a comment. And from all of us here at the longest running superhero role playing game on earth, we hope you have a good one, and we'll see you in the next adventure. Bye.